What's up, guys? Kentucky Cichlids here again. Hope everyone's doing great. Today, we're going to be going over a video on water changes. We are going to go over some of the processes while we do water changes and some products you may or may not want to make this process a little easier for you. So, with that, let's go ahead and just get right into it. First things first, you are going to want to go ahead and get all your fish keeping equipment out that you will be using each time you do a water change. For me, that's going to be some buckets, cleaning rod with a couple of different attachments on the end of it, a large water siphon, a smaller water siphon, and a magnet cleaner with a temperature probe just to check temperatures on the water as well. Not everyone's setup is going to look the exact same. Some of you guys may be using some different things as well, but that is the stuff that I like to usually get out for this. The next thing I like to do is wipe down all the interior walls of the aquarium with either my magnetic cleaner or the extension scrub attachment for working around, my filter inputs, the outputs, the heaters, that power head there on the left. So just like to go ahead and get all that stuff scrubbed down, get it all clean and stuff before I actually get started with the actual water change. Doing this before water change, it'll help just kind of drain out the things like stuck algae and debris and kind of help prevent further growth in the future, because as soon as you see a little get in there, it won't be long before you see a lot. So kind of nip it in the bud there and just go ahead and knocking it out kind of helps you out in the future, keeps you from having to work so hard, keep everything clean. So right about here is whenever I decided that magnet cleaner just wasn't doing it for me, trying to get back there, work around that heater. So I am go ahead and getting all my stuff out. My 3 buckets that I use, I've been using them for a while. One thing I do want to touch on, those buckets, you want to make sure that you're just using them for cleaning out the tank. Don't use them for anything else. You don't want any chemicals to get mixed or anything like that. But kind of showing you my attachment there, just putting on a kind of hard, rough sponge on the end of that there. Going to go through the back of the tank, give it a good scrub down anywhere that I couldn't get with that magnet cleaner there. Just get it all scrubbed down and clean so that, like I was saying earlier, whenever we're pulling that water out, we're getting rid of all that gunk and stuff, and it's not just turning around and resettling down and feeding more algae to grow in there, and just keeping everything clean and picture perfect, as some people would say. The next thing we're going to talk about is should always be your next step before you start really draining anything out. You're going to want to make sure you turn your power off to your tank. There's a few reasons why you're going to do that. Firstly, the big one is you're going to be draining water from the tank, leaving the heaters exposed to the air. Those heaters are going to try to be heating the air around them to 80, 82 degrees, whatever you've got it set at. It's just going to overheat, and one of two things is going to happen. One, it's either the really bad thing, it's going to either overheat and crack the glass that's on your tank, because your tank's not meant to have that much heat put up against it. Or two, it's going to burn out your heater. Your heater just isn't going to work anymore. You're going to be stuck replacing one. Heaters aren't cheap. Depending on what your definition of cheap is, I don't think anytime I'm having to go out and replace a $40, $50 part, it's anything to get excited about. So you're definitely going to want to do that. The other reason why you want to unplug everything, your filters included, is going to be just because those outputs, they've got a lot of pressure coming through. They're going to be pushing water out. It's going to be splashing everywhere. It's going to help you in the long run as far as cleanup goes. So we'll get into the whole siphoning method here, though, and actually getting the water out of the tank. Once you've got everything powered off in the tank, you're ready to go ahead and start draining water. There's a few different ways to go about this process. The way I'm doing it is with a manual siphon. So just by pulling the water up the tube using suction, I let gravity bring the water down into the buckets below there. I start with using the big siphon, and I'm just kind of barely hovering the tip of it there over the sand. You'll see me kind of here in a second start sweeping the sand with it. And all that's doing is just picking up any kind of debris, because the sand relative to the debris that you're looking to pick up is pretty heavy. So it's going to pick up that lighter debris that's on the top, kind of put that out into the water, that stuff you scrubbed off the walls earlier. Just going to get that out of the water column there and kind of leave some fresh stuff in there. It's going to be picking up fish waste, food waste, and just anything else that might be stuck in there. There's other products out there, such as the Python water change system, that will hook directly to your sink, and it uses pressure from your water to drain the water out. I'm not into the actual physics of it. I know I've used one before. I don't have anything against them. This is almost therapeutic for me, so I prefer to kind of do it this way here. If you're not looking to spend more than 15-20 minutes, that might be the option for you. I think the big siphon I've got now, it drains pretty fast. So for what it is, it does great for me. And I'm going to continue doing this as long as it's working for me here. I definitely encourage you just to kind of do your own research there, decide which one's going to work better for you. Advantages with the Python, you're not carrying 5-gallon buckets of water back and forth from your sink. The disadvantage in my mind is the not having exact temperature control over it. Python, the water adds just directly back into the tank from the sink, so you're kind of just eyeballing it by feel on the temperature, and then flipping that switch and letting it go back in there. Like I said, do your research, decide what's going to be best for you, but ultimately both of them are going to work the same way in the end. So, just kind of while the water's draining here, we're going to touch on why we actually do water changes for our fish. So, obviously, not necessarily with any pet, but with a lot of pets, I keep reptiles as well. They're in a closed system whenever you put them in. To a tank like that, so obviously you're going to see buildup as far as algae and physical buildup you can see with your eyes, but there are chemicals in the water that do build up over time as well. And essentially what you're doing is removing those chemicals without getting super specific in it. The food that you put in, and then the fish also eating that food, the waste that they put out, it produces ammonia. The ammonia is converted over into nitrite. You'll hear people talk about beneficial bacteria. That's the bacteria that's converting that ammonia over, because even just a little bit of ammonia, terrible for your fish. You'll end up with sick, possibly even dead fish doing it that way. So definitely don't want any ammonia in there. Nitrite is definitely not much better for them either, to be honest with you. But that beneficial bacteria that you have is also going to, on top of that, convert that nitrite into nitrates. What you're doing in the process with the tank is removing the nitrates from the water, replacing it with some water that's not nearly as high in concentration there, and kind of relieving some of that stress off of them. People will debate about doing planted tanks versus unplanted tanks. I personally don't have this one planted just because cichlids, especially in Buna, they like to eat, they like to graze. Pretty much anything you plant and they're with them, they're going to tear up. If you're curious about it, I encourage you to try it. It might not be the exact same scenario for you. I'll say I've done it a couple of times over the years. I've never really had plants work out for me. What you can do, an alternative to that, is having hang on the back filter. You can have a couple of plants that are growing in the actual filter themselves. This will just help you decrease the amount of times that you're needing to do water changes, because that plant is going to use those nitrates that we're looking to remove from the water to grow out and actually sprout. It's not going to eliminate ever having to do water changes. There are, tanks that you don't have to do anything besides top them off, unless you're going, super heavily planted, and for a fact with testing that those plants are eating up all the nitrates left in the tank. I definitely recommend still doing your testing, figuring out what schedule is going to work best for you, and then kind of moving from there. Each person's going to be a little bit different. I like to do a 50% water change. I say I like to do it bi-weekly. Be honest, it's every 3-4 weeks, maybe a month that I'm doing one. I don't ever let my nitrates really get above 30 parts per million. The standard is 50 parts per million. As I've mentioned in a previous video, if you're looking to breed and have, some healthy fry in there and have them grow up to, be strong, you're going to want to keep it below 10 parts per million. So you're going to be, thinking weekly 50% water changes. But people figure them out. There's people who do weekly 20%, people who do bi-weekly 30-40%, people who do bi-monthly 75% water changes. So it's all up to your ecosystem and what you've got going on in your tank, how many fish you've got, and things like that. So just kind of determine the schedule yourself there, decide what's going to work for you, and then stick to it once you find something that works. Here I'm going to take that little siphon that I've got, You can see me, I've stopped using that big one. I've got the tank drained to about where I want it. That little siphon, it doesn't pull much water off. I don't even think I got maybe 10% of the bucket filled up by the end of whenever I finished up using it. But same process, just use suction to pull it up. Going to use gravity to drain it out. And I use that to kind of get in between the rocks there because there's not a ton of space. Those rocks are pretty tight in there. Those are some pretty decent sized rocks. You want it to be like that in your tank just so they got plenty of hiding space, plenty of territory, and ways that they can basically get out of sight of other fish because your top 1, 2, 3 fish are unfortunately going to be a little aggressive towards the rest of the pack there, and everybody's kind of these fish are hierarchical fish, so just make sure you're getting into their areas, their tight knit areas there, and get all the extra debris out, just so you don't have anything extra in there causing ammonia, just putting more stress on your tank and causing you to have to do water changes more frequently. The next step in your process is going to be obviously filling the tank back up after you get it, cleaned up to wherever you're wanting it, specified at, and you're ready to start adding water back. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about that process. There's a few different water conditioners out there you can use. I've never had a problem with any of them that I've used, and I've used, five, six, seven different ones of them. I personally use just the Chem Prime. You'll see me here in a little bit get under the cabinet and grab that, but I use that for my conditioner there. It's pretty concentrated. A bottle typically will last me quite a while. I'm talking a year for a $10 bottle, $12 bottle, something like that. So I'll precondition in my bucket as the water's filling up. I'll fill test to get the water as close as I can. I'll move it over into the bucket in the kitchen sink here, and I'll start filling the bucket up. I'll drop that temperature probe into the bucket. I like to try to keep it within 3 degrees max in between what your tank's ambient temperature is versus what you're putting back into it. Obviously, the closer to the temperature you can get, the better. It's just going to be less shock for the fish, less work on your heater if you shoot it under whenever you get everything back online and powered on once everything's filled back up. But that's kind of my process there. I will say doing it with the buckets, it is kind of boring, especially if you don't have a faucet that's got great pressure. I think I've got pretty decent pressure here, and it still takes a few minutes each bucket to get it filled up, and so just a lot of time sitting there waiting on it and putting your dosage in there. Just follow whatever dosage you've got on yours. I'm not going to say mine just because I'm afraid somebody will get it mixed up with theirs. Just read the instructions on the back. It'll tell you exactly how many milliliters per gallon. And on top of it, typically most of the lids have a measurement on them as well. There's brands out there. AquaSafe is the one I think of off the top of my head. You can pick the stuff up at Walmart, and like I said, I've used that as well, and it's worked great for me. I've never had any kind of issues or anything like that. So whenever filling the tank back up, you're just going to want to make sure that you're not doing it too quickly whenever you're pouring the water back into the tank, because you're just going to stir up a lot of sand. It's going to create some cloudiness. I will say with Prime especially, I've noticed a little bit of cloudiness whenever adding new water. That's typical for your tank. Whenever you're doing that, it'll usually clear up 15, 20, 30 minutes later. If it doesn't, I've had great results using AccuClear. Some people love it, some people hate it, some people swear by it. I've used it many a time, and it's never caused any problems with my cycle in my tank, never caused any issues with my fish that I've noticed. So if that's something that you don't feel like waiting on, you can definitely dose your tank with AccuClear there, and it will help clear everything up a little bit faster. But this is typically, like I was saying earlier in the video, the longest process, just waiting on the water to fill up there. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward through here until the end, and you'll see where we get the tank plugged back up, and all the fish are happy and swimming around in their freshly clean water, and we'll be ready to do it in another 3 to 4 weeks. So here you go.